Working with my dad has been one of the best experiences. My dad has been doing personal injury law for almost 40 years now. He's very old school in his ways, and nothing against that. He's been extremely successful. But I knew that when I came in, we had to make changes because the world is changing. A lot of people are going to Google now. So I knew that we had to find a way to continue to grow the firm and modernize. And that posed to be one of the biggest challenges when I came in, was explaining to my dad, listen, there are things that we need to do to make sure that we're keeping up. The first thing when I came into the firm, I remember saying to him, we need to.
Welcome back to New York's Business Podcast. My name is Jacob Restituto. I'm the host and owner of Restituto Media, a full-service photo and video company here based on Long Island. And today I'm joined with Lindsay from Langella and Langella. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. Langella and
It
Langella,
is.
Lindsay Langella and Langella Law Firm.
Yeah, so we have the double initials there.
But also then law firm and all the things going on.
Yep, a lot of L's.
A lot of L's. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast
Sure.
and to hear your story. So for people that aren't familiar with you, can you kind of give the backstory on who you are and what you do and how you got into the industry?
Absolutely. So my name is Lindsay Langella. I am a plaintiff's personal injury attorney. My office is in Hauppauge, Langella and Langella Law Firm, and I work with my dad. And I've been with him about 3 years now. We exclusively handle plaintiffs' personal injury cases. So that means if anybody is involved in an accident where it's not their fault, they can come and consult with us, and we look to hold the responsible party or person accountable and get them compensated for their injuries. Usually this comes in the form of car accidents or trip and falls, slip and falls at a store. Maybe it's a dog bite, something along the lines of, I was involved in an accident, I got hurt, and so we look to get you compensated for what happened to you.
Was law something you always were interested in, as your father was a lawyer? Or I know that sometimes when kids are growing up, they can say, I want to do exactly what my parents are doing, or I want to do nothing compared to what my parents are doing.
I
So
get this question a lot, and I really think it was something that was always in me, and I know that that sounds like so cliche, and now I work with my dad, but I've always been a natural born leader, whether it was the sports teams that I was on. I found myself falling into the role of being a captain. I feel like in school, when we had projects, I always looked to be the team leader. And I think that being a lawyer falls into a lot of those qualities in a lot of different ways. So I do think that law is something that I always was interested in. I joined the law school mock trial team. In high school, I volunteered for youth court and I was on my high school trial team. Um, I think that it was just something that I always found myself gravitating towards, even though my dad was a lawyer and still is a lawyer, of course. And, I love it. The direction that I took, um, after being in law school and being on mock trial, I found myself gravitating towards wanting to be in the courtroom because I have this competitive nature in me. And that led me towards an internship in the Suffolk County DA's office. And I started out my legal career as a prosecutor. And I went from there and I loved it. I loved being a prosecutor. I love being in the courtroom. I love being a litigator. And now I've been with my dad 3 years. We formed Langella and Langella this year. After being a prosecutor, I fell into working in insurance defense for a little while, so I see the other side of what we do. And then I joined a medium-sized plaintiff's personal injury law firm before making the transition to go in with my dad. So I felt like I had enough experience before making that decision to join my dad's practice.
first of all, a buddy of mine actually I was just finished up law school maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and also did a internship with the Suffolk County DA.
Okay, great.
Had some really interesting stories of some of the things that were going
Yeah,
on in that.
yeah, it's something new that happens every day.
Well, that and also some of the things that you don't even know are happening as a civilian,
Sure,
and then you're like, wait, that happened where? And that
right,
happened what?
right.
Or what happened? It's pretty remarkable. Some of the stuff that goes on, not in a good way, remarkable.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up right here in Northport. And when I started my internship in the DA's office, I went with one of the prosecutors that handled the village courts. And Northport, believe it or not, is one of the biggest village courts in Suffolk County. And I didn't know this growing up, but there's a lot of crime that happens in Northport. And going to Northport Village Court really opened my eyes up in a lot of ways.
Petty crime or like some big time crime?
Um, no, I wouldn't say like big time crime, but they do Northport Village Court is one of the bigger outlying courts in terms of the cases that they bring in.
Or would a village court handle it as differently than like a Suffolk County court or something like that?
So the village courts handle a lot of the traffic violations and misdemeanors. The felonies will still often get sent out to Central Islip or Riverhead.
So talk to me about starting the law firm with your father. So you mentioned that you kind of went to a couple different law firms and a couple different routes, which I think is really interesting because you kind of get a taste for all the different aspects of law, and you can kind of now think like a. Said you worked with the insurance, so you kind of know what the other side is playing with now at the moment, when you're on now the prosecuting side. And talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. So I felt like it was very important that I was able to gain my own experience as an attorney. And at the end of the day, I knew that I wanted to wind up going into practice with my dad. Honestly, I didn't think that I would do it as early as I did in my career, but it just came about. And my dad, you know, approached me with it when I was at a different plaintiff's personal injury firm. And he said, I think it's time. Come in, learn the business. Why not now? And I'm glad that I took that leap of faith when I did, even though I was scared. I guess scared is not really the right way to put it. I was a little hesitant, right? Because I just felt like, okay, this is the rest of my career. But I did really feel like I had enough of my own experience practicing law, handling personal injury law, especially because that's what we specialize in. And I had a lot of trial experience in the DA's office. Being in the DA's office, I worked with victims, right? So I knew how to appropriately handle investigating files, which is a lot of what we do today. And I knew how to work with people and help people. And plaintiff's personal injury similarly aligns with being a prosecutor in a lot of ways. And I think that's why I love what I do today as much as I did when I was a prosecutor. And I loved that job too, because I am helping somebody get their life back on track or helping somebody that can't get their life back on track because they've been so seriously injured and getting them the right compensation that they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when there's ongoing expenses after the injury.
Absolutely.
I'd like to hear about the first of all, we're going to talk about the day-to-day of your life as a lawyer, but also the family dynamic of working with your family. And it's interesting. I enjoy the opportunities that I get to have speaking with a lot of people that run family businesses or multi-generational businesses, because it's a very unique dynamic, and working with family can either make or break a company. And I just love to hear your perspective on that.
Working with my dad has been one of the best experiences. And when I first went into practice with him a little over 3 years ago now, everybody asked, "How's it going?" And they would wait for your response, not sure what you're going to say. And it's really worked out. It's become something that I think we're both really proud of. I will say I do not take for granted the fact that I came into a practice that was established, right? I have not done this on my own. But that doesn't come without its own challenges either, because my dad has been doing personal injury law for almost 40 years now, right? And he's very old school in his ways, and nothing against that. He's been extremely successful. But I knew that when I came in, we had to make changes because the world is changing. Things are, a lot of people are going to Google now because we're a very big referral based firm, right? And a lot of people are finding not just attorneys, but doctors. If you're planning a wedding, you're going right to Google. So I knew that we had to find a way to continue to grow the firm and modernize. And that posed to be one of the biggest challenges when I came in was explaining to my dad, listen, there are things that we need to do to make sure that we're keeping up, right? And we are a smaller firm, so there are many larger firms out there that we just can't compete with on the Google sphere, right? So how do you do this? What steps do we take to make sure that we continue to remain competitive? We bring in clients not just from referrals, but we're also bringing in new clients from finding us online. So that posed to be one of the more challenging aspects of coming into the firm and working with my dad. But I think that we've continued to build upon that success every year, and especially this year, we've brought in a lot of, well, I think I brought in a lot of new changes. That's really worked for us. I will say there are some moments where we definitely disagree and butt heads. My dad has never worked with another attorney in the firm, so it's just the two of us. And in all the years that my dad has practiced, my dad has never shared a file with another attorney. So that was new and interesting for him. But we really work very well together. We've built upon the model that he's laid the groundwork for. And that is really that we work very one on one with our clients, and we pride ourselves on that truly. I am a firm believer that clients need to be involved in the process and clients need to be educated. No client should be left in the dark by their attorney when they're going through something that is so traumatic. And I've seen law firms not do it this way, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that this is what works for us and has made us so successful.
You mentioned that you're a relatively smaller firm and there's a lot larger of firms. What would be some of the benefits of working with a smaller firm compared to some of those larger firms?
Well, because we are a smaller firm, that one-on-one relationship that we form with our clients really is at the forefront of working on a client's file. When a client comes into the office, I'm not looking at it as another case file. I'm looking at it as I'm forming another relationship with somebody, and I'm really understanding my client. I'm understanding their family life, what they do for work, and what they've lost. Because I feel like if you can't do that, then you can't successfully advocate for your client when it comes to the resolution of their case. And for me, what is so important and what has remained so important is being somebody that is in my client's corner while they go through this. Because when you think about it, right, somebody is coming into your office and they're telling you about this horrible accident that happened to them, and they're confiding this in you. They're telling a very small group of people what has happened in their life about this, right? Maybe they're going to their family, their friends. They're probably not even sharing this with their colleagues, but they're sharing this with you as their attorney. And then as their case goes on and as maybe their injuries progress and their treatment progresses, they're turning to you for a lot of different conversations. And I want to feel like more than just an advocate, I want to feel like I'm somebody that they can trust and depend on and guide them throughout this process.
So essentially, they're getting a bit more of the hands-on experience that they wouldn't necessarily receive from a larger firm.
Right. And I think the larger firms, a lot of the times, client cases, this maybe the smaller ones, even some of the bigger ones, they're not actually even handled by an attorney. They're handled by a paralegal or a case manager, which again is fine. I'm not saying that there's really any right or wrong way to do this. I'm just saying that this is our model and this is our system and our process. And that's why we feel like we are very successful in the way that we do it. And truly, I think that that's why clients come to us over some of those bigger firms because they recognize the fact that they're hearing what we've done for clients outside of just a number as to what their settlement is.
Talk to me about the modernization that you brought to your father's firm. What did that look like and how are you actively rolling that out?
Sure. So I will say this is something that I definitely personally struggled with, like outside of bringing this to the firm, I had to figure out a way to do this for myself too. Because when you meet people, there's not an immediate need necessarily for a personal injury attorney, right? You're not going to walk into a room or go to a networking event and somebody is telling you, oh, I was in a car accident on the way here, right? So, how do you form these relationships and make sure that when that is the case for somebody, you're the person that they think of? And I thought about this, and in the world that we're living in now and how big social media is, a lot of attorneys started creating their personal brand on social media. And I just wasn't sure how to do this, but I did think that it was so important personally for me to do this and for the firm to do this. Because, like I said, being a smaller firm, it's important that I feel like clients connect with us, right? So now we've changed our website, which we're continuing to update. We've made sure that we have the Google business platform with, our clients. I'm really appreciative, leave us these glowing reviews. And now I'm tying in the social media component to it where I've developed this personal brand through an amazing marketing team that I've hired. And I'm sharing a lot of insight, not just about what I do as my day to day life as an attorney, but as a mom, as a wife. So it's another way for clients to be able to connect with me on another level. And it's a way for prospective clients to be able to find me, right? maybe it starts with a Google search, or maybe it starts through word of mouth, somebody saying, "Oh, you really should contact Lindsay Langella." And now, I'm bringing more than just maybe a website to the table. Now I'm showing a little glimpse of who I am, um, in a way that I think is very unique and makes us stand out as a firm in general.
Talk to me about the convincing side of convincing your father to modernize. I commend you for doing it, and I think this is a bit of a friction point between a lot of generations, and a lot of generations. For example, we're around the same age. We spoke about beforehand. We going to school at the same
Sure.
school, and so my parents are around the same age. My dad owns a construction company, and I many years ago helped in the office with them part time. And one of the things that I remember is like saying, okay, how do we get you out there with social media or marketing or branding? What does that look like? And it's a long-term game, because it's not like hey, I put out a mailer and I know that if I spend X amount of money, I will get X amount of calls, typically based on statistics, right? It's a bit more of like, okay, I'm spending all this time and money, but what am I getting from it? Especially when their generation comes from a handshake deal and, hey, let me introduce you to my friend kind of industry. Things have changed significantly. And my dad even talks about that, how handshake deals aren't good enough anymore, and people are changing. The way the business is done is changing, whether it be for the better or worse. And I'm curious, uh, if I've experienced, I know that a lot of other business owners and younger generations coming in, whether they're family or not, when you come into any sort of company and say, hey, we should try this. How did you convince him? What does that convincing look like? And what was the pushback?
So we definitely had a lot of conversations. The first thing when I came into the firm, I remember saying to him, we need to update and modernize the website a little bit. So that was the first thing. I feel like, to answer your question, the short answer is you have to slowly have these conversations. It's like baby steps. If I have a list of 10 things, maybe one week I'm going to him with one thing, and the next couple of weeks I'm kind of slowly giving him these other ideas that I want to incorporate and bring in. So I feel like in ways that we've modernized where he did not give me pushback was doing the website, because he agreed with that. We've hired a bigger staff because we've grown in the 3 years that I've been there. So I had to do the hiring and find, the people that fit our needs for what we would need, and incorporating the marketing part of it, right? So we added in email marketing, we added in social media in terms of my personal branding. We have a couple of other things that we're working on, as the months or years continue to progress, right? We had to update our computer systems, which was big. But I think that he is very open to a lot of my ideas, especially now being there 3 years. 3 years to me, sometimes I get stuck in that, oh, it's 3 years is such a long time. And then I look back and I say to myself, but 3 years is a really short time to see what we've done so far. And I'm excited for where the next 3 years are going to go. So I understand, a lot of people may be struggling with the fact of having these conversations with their parents and going into their family business. How do you incorporate this, right? What conversations do you have? I would say have the conversation, right? Because the longer that you sit and muster, "Ooh, I want to do this, but I don't know how to approach, my family member with this conversation," the more that you're just proactively not getting it done. So go sit down, have that conversation. Have the numbers to show the return on investment, right? Because I think a lot of the times the older generations are stuck on, I want to see it, right? I need to see that this is going to be a model that may work for us. And that is where, I had these conversations with my dad. He was open to it. And I feel like we have been successful in that, in bringing in, not these huge changes with huge expenses, but slowly starting to incorporate other aspects into the business.
I want to piggyback on what you said, and I really admire the uh, the first tip that you gave was essentially drip therapy kind of thing, where
Right.
just do one thing at a time, rather than, because I think, especially when coming into a business, whether you're just an employee or whether you're a family member joining a family business, you can be very passionate and excited of wanting to change and seeing, oh my gosh, especially, you live in your house for 15 years and you kind of get used to all the things that are wrong with it, and then somebody moves in after you and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much we have to fix, right? And business can be the same way, where you kind of get used to the problems that you have, and then somebody else comes in, it's like, we got to fix all these things. It can become very overwhelming and very frustrating from on the other the receiving end of like, oh, this guy came in and now wants to change my entire business. And I really admire it. It's like, let's just do one thing. And then once they see the potential success from that, let's just do one more thing. Let's just do one more thing. And it's almost like a drip therapy, like I said, like I mentioned.
Right, or like a
Yeah,
snowball
a
effect
snowball
almost.
effect,
Right.
exactly.
I think that that has been the best way that I found having these conversations with my dad works, right? Because something that you said too that I'll circle back to is let's give the analogy of you buy a house, right? Um, what's harder? Building a brand new house or coming into a house and doing all the renovations? I'm sure that there's many different answers to that, right? I came into coming into a house and we had to make renovations, right? That's how I look at the law firm. But you don't do those renovations overnight either. You do those renovations one step at a time, right? And once you finish the kitchen, maybe you move on to something else. And that's exactly the approach that I had with my dad. Let's take this one step at a time. And I knew that there were certain things that were going to be harder for him to try to wrap his head around. I mean, social media is definitely one of them. He is like, I cannot believe that you're going to post these social media videos on Instagram, right? But it's worked. I mean, we've had a ton of feedback. We've brought in new clients from it. And I said, let's just give it a try.
So I want to piggyback on that because social media content can be a touchy subject because it can be very unsuccessful or very successful. And it's hard to kind of have a conversation about it with businesses because, again, some businesses are doing extremely well with it and some are spending a lot of time and money and it's just not going well. And I think some of it's like quote unquote luck, but I also think that some of it is doing it right and there's a right way to do it. Um, I would just like to hear your experience because that's really interesting. I was debating whether or not to ask if how like if you were getting clients out of it, and you mentioned the fact that you were. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Right. So this is something that I feel like I really personally struggled with. I, back in September of 24, felt very stuck. The first year that I came into practice with my dad, I felt like I was learning the business side of being a lawyer because up until that point, I was a lawyer. I didn't have to worry about the business side of it. The second year, I got pregnant with my daughter and took maternity leave. So now, fast forward, and we're moving into year three, and I'm starting to bring in some of my own clients. I'm starting to make a name for myself, but I want to level up, right? I want to continue to grow the firm. I want to go from here to here. How do we do that? What is a way that we're able to do that as a small firm with a smaller budget than some of these bigger firms? And looking at social media, a lot of people are putting their businesses out there on social media, right? It's not just attorneys. So one night I'm sitting in bed and I'm scrolling on my phone like a lot of us, and I was looking at different attorney profiles, and one attorney came up and I just loved her content. And I said, let me just message her, why not? And I said to her, who does your social media content? Who does your Instagram posts? And she said, I do. And I said, wow, I love it so much. And I saw that she was connected to this networking group. And then I decided to go to one of these meetings. Not knowing that she was going to be there, I just decided I need to get into the right rooms. I need to find a way to not feel stuck anymore. And somebody said the other day that you can outwork self doubt. And I love that so much because all it took was me changing my mindset to decide I don't want to feel stuck anymore. I'm seeing other people do this. Why can't I do it too? I just have to do it in a way that works for me.
Can you elaborate on that quote because I like it, but I'm not sure I totally grasp it.
Sure. So I think that when you fall into this trap of just continuing to doubt yourself, right, you have to find a way to outwork that. And you can totally do it. It just means that you have to put in more work, right? You have to work harder to get out of that. Some people continue to stay there and then
I think
never
the
put in,
majority of people
right, and then
stay there.
never put in the time or the work to make that change or never find a way to get out of that to make that change. And I knew that I wanted to do it. I just wasn't sure how. I was looking for guidance. And when I was looking at these other attorney Instagram accounts and their posts, I knew that I couldn't really put these posts together, right? So when I went to one of these networking events, I wound up meeting the person that now runs the agency that runs my Instagram account. And when we met, I said, I don't really know what I want this to look like. I just want it to be authentic and genuine to me, right? I'm not a flashy and showy person, but I think that there's so much value in this. And I want people to be able to connect with me so that when they do need a personal injury attorney, I'm somebody that they think of. And to go back to your piece of bringing in business by doing that, when people reach out to me on social media, they'll say, I just recently saw your post and I wanted to reach out to you. I mean, people that I haven't spoken with in years, right? Um, because I'm reminding them this is what I do, and the more consistent that the posts are, the more I'm staying in their mind a little bit, right? Like, oh, I just saw Lindsay talk about this the other day, and I know that she handles this part of car accident cases. So that's where the success came in, and that's where the change was made. It was really just a shift in mindset. It was recognizing that I wanted to do something, I just needed the help to be able to bring this in. And it hasn't been a long time of doing this really. So that was September of 24. By mid to end of November, we launched my Instagram account where we took over my own Instagram account and made this personal brand. Fast forward now a couple of months later, and it's grown into something that I really am so proud of.
That is pretty impressive. It really has not been that long. It's been, I mean, we're filming this in early May, so 6.5, 7 months
Yeah.
that you, and to even get clients out of that. And I want to talk a little bit about the fee structure of how your side of the business works.
Okay.
But that being said, I'm assuming based on, I mean, this is my industry, the photo video industry. So, and I do a lot of social media content for clients.
Right.
So, based on typical fees that I'm assuming bringing one client probably plays for, if not all of that, or a significant portion of that monthly
Oh,
fee.
absolutely. Right.
And
And
that's what a lot of businesses don't understand is like, if you're willing to put an upfront cost of the investment, the initial upfront opportunity cost, very often, especially if you're working with the right people, one client or two clients or one job, like my dad again owns a construction company, one job would pay for probably 4 years worth of social media work for like a and it's just being willing to take that risk.
so that goes back to my point of showing the numbers, right? Making sure that you're prepared to make this investment and then what is the end goal going to be? What is your return on investment going to be? So as personal injury attorneys, our fee on cases come out at the end, right? You hear everybody say like no fee unless we win. Well, that's true for all of us personal injury attorneys. So we take a contingency fee, it's 33 and a third percent when we settle your case, when we're successful, right? So exactly what you said, Jacob. When I look to what we're spending on social media versus bringing in some of these cases now and new clients from social media, most settlements, settle for more than what we're spending on social media in a year. So it was a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm bringing in, half a dozen clients or a dozen clients a week from this, but exactly like you said,
All you
if
need is
you're
one.
right,
One
exactly.
a year and it's
Right,
worth it,
right.
which is not that crazy.
It's not.
Just I'm curious. You talked about you were very comfortable being a lawyer, and now you had to learn the business side of being a lawyer. And one of the things I want to talk about is, so you mentioned 33 and a third percent. I'm assuming, and I'm not looking for obviously for specific numbers here, but like I'm assuming not all that goes to you. It goes to the business, and then how does that essentially work? Like you're breaking it down, I guess, into all like operating expenses and then salaries, or how does that typically like how does it work?
Absolutely. Sure. So it's not that you're getting that 33 and a third percent right back into your pocket. And we're not a virtual firm. So of course we have, a lease that we have to pay. We have 5 employees that we have to pay and we have operating expenses. So, when you're looking at settlements, it has to go back into the business side. And now we're also looking at putting it back into the marketing side, which is something that my dad wasn't previously doing. And just the other day, we were having this conversation, and I said, I admire you so much because you may be one of the only attorneys I know that has been so successful with really not doing any marketing. And how cool is that, that he's built this practice based on his reputation? People like him, people go back to him. And that's why I said we can continue to build on this. We just have to add in another layer of it.
That's exactly what it is, and a lot of people are so allergic to the idea of starting with social media or something like that. But if you've been so successful already, it's not like you're changing something that's not broken. You're just adding a whole, just another
Right,
opportunity.
right.
So let's just talk. Let's talk about the day to day. What does the day to day look like inside of the business?
So I will say the day to day is definitely different than my day to day when I was a prosecutor. And I definitely miss that part of being a prosecutor because my day to day now, in terms of being in the office, is very much a desk job. Even though I am going to court a couple of times a week, but my day to day is why I'm a mom. So I wake up in the morning. My husband and I have been on a good kick of working out, which I think is very important to have that self care component. now that my daughter is almost 2 and she's sleeping, right? Because we're not as tired anymore. My husband's a teacher, so he leaves in the morning. I get to spend time with my daughter, which is really nice. And because it's my dad and I as the firm, I am my own boss. So thankfully, I have the flexibility to, if I want to take her to a library class in the morning, I can, as long as I don't have anything client scheduled or court. And then I'll head into the office. And I won't say that it's the same routine every day. It's very much not. But it's largely a lot of managing a lot of different components, handling client files, scheduling new client meetings, handling team meetings. I wear a lot of hats at the firm, which I'm proud of. And I think that my dad has worked really hard to be able to pass a lot of that off to me. One of the things I will say, and people watching this may go one way or another over this, but I'm really proud of this. If one day nobody came into work at my firm, I would be able to run the entire law firm. And I felt like that was so important for me because you just don't know what the next day is going to bring. But also, I'm the one that's now hiring the staff to come in and I'm training, right? So I'm the one that has to be able to put in the right systems, the right process, how to make this work so that we're making sure that our clients are feeling heard and that everybody is working hard on their files and doing exactly what needs to be done one step at a time.
I want to kind of bring this back to social media really quick with an analogy or a comparison essentially with what you just said about being able to wear every hat in the office. And one thing that I think that going back to social media, a lot of businesses struggle with social media is they don't learn enough about social media up front before they hire a company. And the problem with that is that you don't know if the company's doing a good or bad job. And I find that really, we can tie this back into your position when you're hiring for employees or positions in the firm. If you don't know the position or even just an idea of the position and what that holds and what a successful day or task completion for that position would be, you can't really gauge as to if they're a successful employee.
Right.
So
I
I think that's one
absolutely
of the
agree.
absolute benefits and the difference I think is that you don't actually do every position, but you could if you needed to.
Right. And I am not a social media expert. And that's why I said that's where I was feeling stuck because I recognized that this is something I wanted to do, but I had to find the right team to do it for me. Obviously, I'm doing it with them, I'm the one making the videos with them. Um, But my social media team, the way that I connected with them and found them was they handle a lot of social media accounts, right? And I think that that's so important because once they build up their portfolio and you're looking at some of the posts that they're doing for other clients that they have, you should say to yourself, do I like these posts? Even though this person is in a different profession or business, is this something that I could see myself doing? And that's where I made the connection and decided to work with them and jump in working with them. I do understand why businesses are so hesitant to get into social media because it's so many different moving parts. But the one thing I will say, social media is free, right? Like my business pays somebody to do it. But social media is an advertising platform that everybody can use and it costs you nothing but your time.
I had a really interesting conversation with a recent guest, and one thing he said is that so many business owners get overwhelmed by the opportunities that are out there, whether it be TikTok, whether it be Instagram, whether it be direct to mail marketing, whether it be email marketing, whatever the case may be, billboards, and your industry, a lot of people do bus stop signs, right?
Right.
Just like there's so many opportunities out there, and people then just get paralyzed by paralysis by analysis. Well, what do I even do? I don't even know where to start to learn. And what I found interesting that he said is, to paraphrase, you really just got to look at what's relevant to you and what would best serve you. You don't have to do all 100 of them. In fact, it would probably be a disservice to you to do all 100 of them. So pick one, two, three to start with, and then just take it from there and see which ones best serve you as, for example, a lawyer, or he owns essentially an Uber style company, and like what would best serve him, what
Right.
marketing opportunity, instead of trying to figure out all of them and learn all of them and be overwhelmed that you're actually getting nothing done. Pick one or two or three, and I kind of find that really interesting.
I agree with that. That was advice that was given to me when I wanted to jump into social media and tying in my professional life and my personal life. I already had an Instagram and a Facebook account. I don't have TikTok. And I didn't really want to make these TikTok videos because that made me feel uncomfortable too. I wanted to do what I was already familiar with. I already had the platforms. I just had to change my content a little bit by adding in the professional piece of it. And exactly what you said, there are so many different platforms out there or so many different options and ways to advertise. Just pick one to start and see how it goes.
Mm.
The one thing I will say though is give it time because you're not going to see an instant gratification, right? And I guess for me, like I was able to bring clients in from it, but also I was connecting with people that were already in my network on these platforms I already had. But once you decide that this is where you want to go, I think that you absolutely have to give it at least 6 months to a year because it's consistency that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause, I mean, this was my industry, and I posted every day on all platforms for several, I mean, months before even I even saw any sort of even traction that was like, oh, this is actually worth my time. And then
Right.
after, and then that's just me saying, hey, this is worth my time. This is not any sort of dollar that I made, or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it took several years for me to even start making any sort of money or any sort of ROI. And it also depends on how you want to go about it. If you want to make the money up front or the long-term game, there's a
Right.
whole
Absolutely.
can of worms that you can
Yeah.
open up with that. I'm curious about any services or programs or applications that you're using that are really help streamline your business? Is there anything that out there that you think other businesses would benefit from?
I think that in my profession, it's so important to be organized, right? I mean, I carry malpractice insurance, but you want to make sure that nothing goes wrong because I'm holding a license, right, to do what I do. And everything that I do is that I'm doing the right thing, but then I'm also staying organized so that I'm not missing anything. So definitely pick a system that works for you. Make sure that you have it all backed up because you just never know what could happen. And my dad will always say this, you never want to get sloppy in handling a file for a client, right? If a client calls and they want an update, you want to make sure that you're able to give them exactly what they're looking for in terms of how their case is progressing and what you're working on. That is so important. And your staff is a big part of that. So you want to make sure that you're not doing it all, right? Like I said, I wear a lot of hats, but I've gotten to the point now where we have 5 people on staff. I've hired in the past 3 years, I've brought on every new employee that we have, with the exception of one that's been with my dad for almost 19 years now. So, it's definitely making sure that you're not doing it all because I think that's where you can get sloppy because you're just one person and you have to make sure that you're designating certain tasks, but that again, you're putting in that system and process for everybody to follow to make sure that this is how you want it done.
Going back to the fee structure briefly, you mentioned the 33.5% when you win. What happens if hypothetically you lose?
So in New York, personal injury attorneys, that 33 and a third percent, that contingency fee is a standard fee unless you do medical malpractice. Medical malpractice attorneys get paid on what's called a sliding scale, which is different. If there's no settlement at the end of the day for clients, most of the time under the retainers, because there's two options for our costs and expenses, and those are things that we're doing. I always say to clients, costs and expenses, think of that being done outside of the office. That's being done in the prosecution of your case to work on and build your case. If there's no settlement, most clients will choose the option where they don't owe anything back to us and it just becomes a business write off to us. So there's really nothing to lose
What
if
would
you're
be
in.
the other option though?
The other option in the retainer is what we call a pay as you go method. So in that option, the 33 and a third percent never changes. That fee is not going to change, right? What changes is the way that you may get those costs and expenses back. So years ago, they changed the retainer options so that clients have this pay as you go method where those costs and expenses, I can say to the client if they chose another option, I need to file this court filing fee. I need to file this document. I need you to write me a check, right? And then I'll be able to file that fee. At the end of the day, if their case doesn't settle or goes to trial and we don't recover anything, if they had chosen that option, I may be able to get those costs and expenses back from them, whereas I wouldn't be using them, as a business write off to my firm.
So why would anybody choose that option of paying up front?
The fee structure, so the way that the costs and expenses come out is just a little bit
Oh,
different,
I
where the
see.
client may wind up recovering a little bit more, but the difference is really not all of that significant as to where clients want to owe their attorneys money back at the end of the day if
Sure.
they're not going to win.
Yeah, very interesting. So what's to come in the future for Langella and Langella?
So I'm excited about a couple of things. I was recently awarded with a um, a cool distinction, which I can't yet reveal, but I am really excited about. I'm going to assume a bigger role in a couple of months with an organization that I've been a part of for about a year and a half now. And something that I've also decided to do that I've had in my brain as a thought that I'm finally going to do is I'm going to put forth a mentorship program for students. And I feel like this is so important, not just for me as an attorney, but I think that more businesses and professionals could do this for the younger generation. I am starting a program, it's called Lead Her, where I'm offering the opportunity to students to shadow me for a day. So I'm going to try to do it so that we can pick a court day so they can come to court with me and see that side of it. And then they'll come into the office and we're going to do a lunch and learn. And the motivation behind this, what I want to do is I want to be a resource for these students moving forward. Whether they decide to be a lawyer or not, I think it's so important. Like, I've had great mentors in my life, and I want to do that for students that maybe don't have that person yet. I want to make this available to them. And the way that I envision it is it's not just going to be you're in the program for a day, right? I want to make a group and then maybe we'll have monthly meetings. Some students that already reached out to me said that they're interested in matrimonial law. So I'm hoping to set up a Zoom call with a couple of attorneys that I know that handle divorce law. Like, I want to connect the younger generation, with myself and bridge that gap so that when they do have questions about career choices or could you write me a letter of recommendation, they feel like they have people to turn to. And I already have 3 people enrolled in the program. So it's in the works, but I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking time, and I really appreciate hearing your story. It's a very interesting industry that I'm not super familiar with, so it was cool to learn about the
Well,
industry.
thank you
So,
so much for having me, and
absolutely.
um, it was a great opportunity to be able to share, the family business of being a lawyer and some of the changes that I've brought in that I think a lot of people can incorporate no matter the size of your
Yeah.
business, right?
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you. I also appreciate everybody that listened or viewed this podcast. And if you're a business owner and are interested, or you know any business owners that you think might be interested in coming on the podcast, please feel free to reach out. In the meantime, thank you so much to Lindsay, and
Thank
we'll
you.
see you in the next video.